Star Trek reveals bittersweet ending for Kelvin Timeline's Captain Kirk. Star Trek has revealed a bittersweet ending for the Kelvin universe's Captain Kirk, one that brings his story full circle. Captain Benjamin Sisko and the crew of the Theseus are traveling through the Star Trek multiverse in a bid to save it from destruction at Lore's hands, and issue #26 takes them to the Kelvin universe. The two captains meet, but only one walks away. Star Trek #26 is written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly and drawn by Angel Hernandez. Despite the efforts of both the Kelvin Enterprise and the Theseus, Lore's wave of destruction reaches them. As the Kelvin universe begins to wink out of existence, Kirk offers to hold the line in order to let the Theseus escape. Sisko reluctantly agrees, calling Kirk and his crew heroes. A vision of Kirk's late father then appears to him, and while Kirk's father's face is obscured, it is clear he is proud, realizing that his heroic nature rubbed off on his son. In the mid-2000s, Paramount Pictures decided on a from-the-ground-up reimagining of Star Trek, and this would come to be known as the Kelvin Universe, or Kelvin Timeline. The Kelvin Universe featured sleeker ship designs and younger actors in the established roles of Kirk and Spock. It was created when a renegade Romulan ship traveled back to the early 23rd century, attacking the Federation starship Kelvin, creating a point of divergence. In this new timeline, Kirk's father, George, died, saving the Kelvin's crew from perishing at the hands of the Romulan vessel. The attack on the Kelvin caused not only the history of the Star Trek universe to take a slightly different path, but Kirk's life as well. While Prime Kirk's family life, particularly his relationship with his dad, has not been explored on screen, Kelvin Kirk's was detailed in 2009 Star Trek. Without a strong father figure, Kelvin Kirk grew up without focus, stealing cars and getting into barroom brawls. Kelvin Kirk's mother remarried, but son and stepfather often clashed. Non-canon sources have suggested Prime Kirk had a rough and tumble childhood, but not like that of his Kelvin counterpart. Prime Kirk believed he would die alone, even saying it occasionally, but that did not come to pass, nor did it happen to Kelvin Kirk either. Captain Picard was witness to Prime Kirk's sacrifice and even buried him later. Kelvin Kirk goes out with his crew in a vision of his father. While Prime Kirk may not have realized just how many lives he was saving, he knew he had died a hero. A different kind of uncertainty hangs over Kelvin Kirk's sacrifice, one contingent on Sisko avenging him. The heroic legacy of Kelvin Kirk's father was enormous, saving hundreds of lives, and it would follow his son as well. When Kirk was at arguably his lowest point, Captain Pike invoked George's legacy in a bid to motivate him into joining Starfleet. Something Pike said must have resonated, because not only did Kirk join Starfleet, he rose through the ranks as quickly as anyone ever had before. George Kirk's legacy inspired his son, who would go on to save countless lives himself over the years. With the Kelvin timeline's seeming destruction, this legacy comes full circle. It now falls on Captain Sisko and the crew of the Theseus to keep Kelvin Kirk's legacy alive and honor his sacrifice. Sisko acknowledged that Kirk and the Kelvin Enterprise were heroes, and any mission logs will note this. Kelvin Kirk's sacrifice has strengthened Sisko's resolve to stop Lore and restore the multiverse. This conflict will play out in the forthcoming The Lore War, in which the android recreates reality in his own image. While IDW has not revealed if the Kelvin crew will play a role in the Lore War, their heroic legacy will inspire Sisko. In the world of Star Trek, the Kelvin timeline has always been a fascinating yet controversial parallel universe, introduced in J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot film. This alternate reality provided fans with a fresh perspective on iconic characters such as Captain James T., Kirk, Spock, and the crew of the USS Enterprise, while maintaining the original essence of Star Trek. With its explosive action, emotional depth, and modernized approach, the Kelvin timeline quickly carved out its own identity within the wider Star Trek multiverse. However, with the recent announcement that the Kelvin timeline would be drawing to a close, Star Trek fans were given a bittersweet revelation regarding the fate of Captain Kirk in this alternate universe. For over a decade, Chris Pine has portrayed the cocky yet charismatic James T. Kirk, offering a new take on the legendary captain once embodied by William Shatner. While Pine's Kirk maintained the bold, risk-taking demeanor that fans loved, He also evolved throughout the Kelvin timeline films, from a reckless young officer to a more reflective and responsible leader. The culmination of his journey, however, will reportedly come to an emotional and poignant end in the final chapter of the Kelvin timeline. The hero's journey, in many ways, the arc of Chris Pine's Captain Kirk, mirrors that of a classic hero's journey. From the moment we meet him in the 2009 Star Trek film, we see Kirk grappling with the legacy of his father, George Kirk, who sacrificed himself to save the USS Kelvin and its crew just moments after his son was born. This tragic event served as a catalyst for young Kirk, propelling him toward a path of defiance and rebellion, only to eventually lead him to the helm of the USS Enterprise. Under the mentorship of Captain Pike and alongside his crew, Kirk grew into his role as captain, forming a deep bond with Spock, Zachary Quinto, and other key members of the Enterprise. As the Kelvin timeline films progressed through Star Trek Into Darkness 2013 and Star Trek Beyond 2016, Kirk's journey became increasingly personal. He wrestled with questions of identity, duty, and legacy. The weight of command began to weigh heavily on him, and the shadow of his father's heroism loomed ever larger. At the heart of it all was a man trying to balance the ideals of exploration and diplomacy with the harsh realities of war and loss. The bittersweet end in the final Kelvin timeline film, Kirk's story is expected to reach its emotional climax. Recent reports suggest that Kirk will be faced with a decision that echoes his father's ultimate sacrifice, placing him in a situation that forces him to choose between his life and the greater good. This parallel to the beginning of the Kelvin timeline will not only provide narrative symmetry, but also highlight the growth and maturity of Pine's Kirk, showing that he has fully embraced the selfless nature of leadership. The choice Kirk makes in this final film is rumored to lead to his own heroic death, a sacrifice that will ultimately save his crew and ensure the future of the Enterprise. While the specifics of the plot remain under wraps, it's clear that this ending will be a deeply emotional moment for the character and for fans who have followed his journey over the past decade. The themes of legacy, sacrifice, and destiny that have defined Kirk's arc will come full circle, offering a fitting conclusion to his story in the Kelvin timeline. This ending is bittersweet because while it provides closure for the Kelvin timeline and Kirk's character, it also marks the end of an era for fans who have grown attached to Pine's portrayal of the captain. For many, Pine's Kirk has become as iconic as Shatner's original interpretation, and saying goodbye to this version of the character will undoubtedly be a difficult moment. The legacy of the Kelvin timeline, the decision to close the Kelvin timeline, has sparked much debate within the Star Trek community. Some fans have praised the creative team for crafting a distinct and unique version of the Star Trek universe, while others have lamented the divergence from the prime timeline and the shift toward a more action-oriented storytelling style. However, regardless of where one stands on the Kelvin films, there is no denying the impact they have had on the franchise. The Kelvin timeline reintroduced Star Trek to a new generation of fans, revitalizing interest in the series and paving the way for new television shows like Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. It also proved that there is room for multiple interpretations of the Star Trek universe, each with its own distinct tone and style. The Kelvin films brought modern sensibilities to Star Trek, while still respecting the core values of exploration, camaraderie, and hope that have always defined the series. As the Kelvin timeline prepares to come to a close, fans are left with a mixture of emotions, sadness for the loss of